Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the Blackwood Decor channel. And today is part 2 of our end table build series. So in the first part, we built an end table and then we created these templates so that way we could recreate the process very, very quickly. So I would suggest going and watching that one first. I walk you through step by step on exactly how to build the end table and also create these templates. We use basic shop tools, very beginner friendly project. And there's also free plans in the description down below. Today we are going to take this 8-foot walnut board. This one's obviously rough sawn, so I'm gonna have to get that cleaned up before we can start. But we're gonna turn this one into another end table, but we're gonna add maybe 1 or 2 design aspects that's going to maybe make it a little bit more mid-century modern. It's gonna add a little bit of flair, a little bit of character to our end table. So I'm gonna go get this board cleaned up. After that's done, I'm gonna start a timer so we can see exactly how long it takes us using our templates to make another one of these end tables. Okay, the clock officially starts now. We have our 3 leg pieces cut up. These are roughly 20 inches long, and then we've got our 2 16-inch, a little bit longer than 16-inch because we're gonna refine it. This is gonna be for our tabletop. Obviously, we do not have enough material to finish that tabletop, so as we cut out our legs here, this excess material that we're going to be cutting off to create our legs, that's what we're going to use to put on either side of this to create our tabletop. So let's go get those legs cut out first. That way we can get this glued up and it can be drying as we're finishing our legs. I'm going to cut mine out with the bandsaw just because I have that tool, but you could definitely use a jigsaw. We want to remember not to cut on the line because we're going to utilize this template and a flush trim router bit to clean these up. So we got our 2 tabletop pieces, and we went and cut these off 2 of our legs. Those are gonna go on either side. Now we have room for our tabletop. We will have to trim off these edges, that way we can get some clamps on here, but that's easy, light work. And we can get this glued up, so this is drying while we're working on our legs. Obviously, when we're doing the glue up, we need to be able to clamp all the way across our board here, and we're not gonna be able to clamp on this kind of an edge, kind of the round over. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to take off, I've got my rough circle, I'm gonna take off just the little ends of both of these, so that way those won't be there, and we can actually get a clamp on this end right here to suck that tight. So that's what that looks like. That way we can get a clamp right there, and the next clamp will sit right there. That should suck this thing tight and get a nice clean glue up. It is 1 o'clock. We are officially 1 hour into this project. We've got our tabletop in the clamps. The glue is drying on that. Got about 2 hours before we want to start working with that. So meanwhile, we've got our 3 legs. They are roughly cut out. We are going to use our template on the top of these legs and a flush trim router bit to clean all of those legs up to final dimension. And then we'll get working on how we're going to attach those to the tabletop. Remember, plans for these are free. They're in the description down below. All right, we got to find our center. So we need a square. Put that edge of the square anywhere on the exterior of that circle. And we're going to mark those 2 points. Draw a line across there. And then turn it. Put the edge on the circle. Mark, mark. There's our center point. So I've sanded off the other lines so we don't get confused, but we need to divide this in the 3 quadrants for our 3 legs. So we need a pencil with the string attached to it, and you're going to put that right in that center dot. And you're going to pull that string straight down. And then you're just going to take it and draw a circle. This point, these 2 points to the center, that's going to be where our legs are going to go. Might be hard to see on camera, but there's our lines perfectly, 3 quadrants. All right, we've got our router template to make the mortises on our legs. Remember last time in the other video, we set this up so that way it is going to inlay our leg, this edge, 1/2 inch from the edge of our tabletop. I've got my Forstner bit that is 1/2 inch thick that we are going to mark these out and drill down. That way our router has some place to start. And we're gonna get these mortises drilled out and be one step closer to adding our new design aspect. We're currently 4 hours and roughly 50 minutes into this build, and I'm filming, so that does take a little bit longer. And now it's time for our new design aspect. I want to create kind of a bevel and then flatten the top of this just to give it a little bit of dimension, and then we'll also go back and make that 15-degree chamfer on the outside. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to use a core box bit for our router, and we'll use our fence and our little center pivot point here. Let's get that set up, and we'll get this tabletop beveled in. So we need to find the center of our tabletop. We're going to use the square again. Put it right on the edge. Mark. Make a mark. You want to make sure that this is very, very precise, because if not, it's going to make this design aspect look a little funky if it's a little bit off. So we're working in precision here. I'm going to do one more just to make sure. That way if I messed up, it's just going to give me one more idea that I'm in fact directly in the center. Bingo. In the first video, we talked about how we can use this router fence and this little 1/4 inch rod as our pivot point to make round cuts. That's the same thing that we're going to do here. I'm going to place this perfectly in that center point. Use some I won't use double stick tape on this one. I'm going to probably use some painter's tape and some CA glue. That way, make sure that it's stuck in there really, really well. And what I'll do to make sure it's in the center is I will take that little rod out and line up that hole perfectly. So I'll get that glued down, and then we'll set up our router depth. So I used a black marker just to make a dot so that way I can see it through my painter's tape. It won't matter because we'll be taking this down a little bit with the router. So I had to make a smaller one of these just because it was making contact with this part right here. So just had to refine that real quick. I'm going to get this glued back on here. This is a 3/4 inch core box bit. I'm going to set the depth to roughly 1/8 of an inch. We can always take more off, but we can't add more on. So it's like a haircut. And then what I want to do is I'm going to find the edge, and I'm going to mark 1/4 of an inch from an edge, because that's where I want the edge of our cut, our blade, to meet. So that way we'll have about a 1/4 inch lip on the edge of this going all the way around. We got the depth of our core box bit set to roughly 1/8 of an inch, and we are 1/4 inch away from that edge. And here goes nothing. So that's kind of what it looks like. Now we're gonna have to router out this centerpiece. So I've got our round piece in the router sled. It's tightened down so it's not gonna move back and forth. There's a lot of videos on YouTube on how to make these router sleds. They're super handy, especially if you're making cutting boards and other things like that. And then I've got my other router. It's a two-handed router, a little bit easier to handle. And I've got a longer bit on there. We're not taking off too much, so I'm really not worried about the length of this bit, and it'll give me a little bit more room so I can actually see what I'm working on. But what I want to do is I'm going to try and line this up with that bit right in that groove. So that way I can kind of get the depth, and then I'm going to go a little bit short of that depth. I don't want to take off too much. I'm probably going to do 2 passes on this just to make sure that I'm really dialing in and getting it perfectly flat, and it'll save me a lot of sanding later and or cutting down too far and having to figure that out. So let's get this set up, and we'll start making some passes with the router.